Now we are heading to the last session of the AGORA Second Corporate Affairs Forum, and I feel like this session is a kind of cherry on the cake, at least for me. I was asked during an interview in view of the forum, what is my opinion on how artificial intelligence will impact corporate affairs. I said, I have no clue. I'm waiting for Julian, who is a real expert, to enlighten us on this. So we have the privilege to have with us a real expert on one of the most, if not the number one, hot topic of nowadays. Dear Julian Lambertin, thank you so much. Julian, he's German, correct? We are happy and privileged to have you today with us at the Agora Forum in Athens. Julian is one of the most prominent experts in Brussels, and I would say in Europe, in artificial intelligence, as he has been working extensively on how we can integrate cutting-edge data science solutions like machine learning and artificial intelligence in corporate affairs, while he has developed some really innovative tools, such as Success Decoded and Hidden Signal Detector, which aim to enhance organizational decision-making and crisis management processes. Dear Julian, you have the floor now. We're really looking forward to listening to you and to be enlightened on such an interesting topic. While John ＳΚΟΡΔΑΣ, John, you're here, please join us. You will need the podium, I guess. Sure, yes. Okay, so John, please have a seat on the sofa. John ΣΚΟΡΔΑΣ, among others, he is the co-author of 2049, which is a manual for the future of humanity. Come on, John, it sounds so ambitious, your book. He will be the coordinator or the guy who he will be asking questions to Julian. Please, Julian, the podium is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm conscious I'm the only thing between you and dinner, so I'll try to make it an entertaining 20 minutes. As Andreas said, I'm a data scientist more by accident than by training. I started out actually learning philosophy and focusing on ethics, so it's a special pleasure to be here in Greece. And one of the things I've done to keep this interesting, I've actually hidden a couple of quotes, some of them more hidden than others, from famous Greek philosophers throughout the presentation, because it allowed me to actually combine my two great loves, philosophy and artificial intelligence. So for those of you that pay close attention, you might catch them all. The big question, obviously, is, and it goes back to the book in terms of where's humanity actually heading, and how did we get here? How did we get to this point where we have systems like a ChatGPT that can make everyday work for us so much easier? And how did we get there from the beginnings of logic and sort of thinking through what some call the language of the gods, and that is, or can be, math in terms of how that is expressed. So today we'll go through how AI actually works and how it doesn't work, how AI can be applied in corporate and public affairs, and then a little bit on misinformation and disinformation as well. In terms of how AI works, we've seen huge steps being taken over the last couple of months, obviously, but then also years. But as you can see here, since the early 2000s, there have been periods of quiet, right? And that is because we needed to fundamentally change the way in which we try to teach machines how to become intelligent. And that is also why, in part, we are seeing the huge leaps that we are seeing today and why we haven't seen them earlier. And artificial intelligence is usually divided into three categories. The first one is narrow intelligence, and that means an AI that can do one thing really, really well, that a human can also do, possibly being better at it. So playing chess is a good example, right? There's AI today that can beat any human chess player, even the best in the world. But that's an example of a narrow intelligence, because that intelligence might not be able to cook. It might not be able to take care of a child or do anything else that human can. So that is where we get to general intelligence. That is the level at which an artificial intelligence can do everything that we can do at our level. And then comes what we call superintelligence. That's what you see in movies like Terminator. That is where the artificial intelligence is so smart that it's way ahead of us. It can do everything we can do, but just better. And right now, we are still in the era of narrow intelligence, where AI tools can help us do specific things, and they can do them in an astonishing speed. What we have not reached is general intelligence, let alone superintelligence by any stretch of the imagination, which also means if you're wondering Is it just your job that's on the line tomorrow or your lives? It's neither actually at the moment. And that goes back to the point of if we look at how humans tend to work in professional environments, then experts tend to differentiate between three things. One is tasks, the second is processes, and the third one is an actual role. And I'll give you an example of each of these. Writing a press release, for example, that is a task. Developing a communication strategy, that is a process. Head of corporate affairs, head of public affairs, social media manager, those are roles. And at the moment, AI is fantastic at taking care of tasks. It's not so great at processes, and it really can't do a full role. Right, and so that is the stage that we're at when we look at artificial intelligence. And that then begs the question of why are we at this place? And that is because of the ways that we're trying to teach artificial intelligence. And there's basically three ways. One is supervised learning. The second is unsupervised learning. The third is reinforcement learning. And I'll show you that with a practical example. Supervised learning is quite simple. This is an AI-generated picture. I was too lazy to actually take photographs of multiple dogs. So we're obviously looking at puppy pictures, right? And supervised learning essentially is the process where a human goes, yep, this picture has a puppy, and it tells the machine there's a puppy in the picture. And then at some point, eventually, the machine goes, now I get it. Now I understand what this looks like, right? Because obviously, it would be way harder to teach a machine rules-based. And what I mean by that, you could start describing what a puppy looks like. Floppy ears, long tail, 4 legs, running on 4 legs. But then what happens if you have a puppy that is only shown from the back or from the side, right? You have different breeds of dogs and so on. So it gets really, really complicated to explain to an AI what a puppy should look like based on rules. And so this is based on images because you just show it images of puppies. And then at some point it realizes, there's a puppy here. And it also realizes, well, this is probably not a puppy, it's probably a little toddler. So this is supervised learning. The problem with supervised learning is it does require a lot of human input, right? Because someone has to go through all the pictures. And by the way, if any of you have ever gone through Google Captures where you need to point out the traffic lights and whatnot, that is exactly what Google is doing. It's basically generating material that it can use to teach more AI and better AI. So you are a free learning resource to Google AI in that case. Unsupervised learning works differently. It's basically just telling the AI, you figure it out. I show you something, you tell me what it says. And usually what AI can come up with is looking at things like, well, I guess there's, similar pixels here on this slide, like brown color somewhere. Or maybe, look, there's a round form, but it doesn't quite make sense, right? And that is where unsupervised learning usually hits a limit, where the AI can't become any smarter. Now, who here has children? Could I see raised hands for those of you who have children? 1, 2, a few of them. So for those of you that have children, you know that they're incredible learning machines, right? They learn so quickly, and in a flash, they can talk, they can walk, they can do all the things that humans can do, and you wonder where the time has gone. That is exactly what we're now trying to do with machines as well. We're trying to teach them in the same way that we are teaching children, and that is why you see that picture on the slides right now. The way that children learn is essentially with a reward system, right? You stand up, you see your parents happy, maybe there's a treat somewhere on the desk, and you as a child, you start waddling, getting to the desk, and then you get your treat, right? So you learn you've done something right. And that is reinforcement learning. So it's a blend of supervised learning where someone says, yes, well done, but it's also exploration. You go off on your own and you try and you see whether you can make it work. So it's a blend of the previous two forms. And reinforcement learning is the key reason why we see ChatGPT today and why we see some of the other tools that get out of it. Generally, why we see a new generation of AI that can do all of those amazing things. However, there's still some shortcomings, particularly at the beginning. All of you can probably tell what we have on the left is wolves and what we have on the right is dogs, right? The first time that data scientists felt AI was really smart, they had them look at those pictures, and they were like, well, we can reliably now tell apart dogs and wolves, even though they look quite similar. But actually, the first time that AI got this right was not because of dogs and not because of wolves in the picture. It was because of something else. Do any of you have an idea what that might be? I wouldn't have guessed either. You need to get really creative. It's because wolves are usually shown on snow and dogs are shown on grass. So the AI took the short route. It felt, there's grass in the picture, these must be dogs. There's snow now, those are wolves. Obviously, there are pictures of wolves on grass, and there are pictures of dogs on snow. But you only found out when you actually tested it that way. And those are the things where you don't know, because AI tends to be a little bit of a black box. It doesn't explain to you its reasoning, right? It doesn't come up and go like, yep, there's a lot of white in that picture, those are wolves. It doesn't tell you, it just says these are wolves. And that leads to some of the challenges and the fun moments these days when we experience limitations of AI, where we actually feel it's so smart, but then it's all incredibly dumb all of a sudden. And that is in part why that is. I've done something, actually, let's skip that. I'll keep that for the conversation if there's a question around it. But that shows you why we see some of the things we've been seeing, right? When ChatGPT was quite new, there were a couple of people that tried to give it simple questions like, Bobby's mother has 4 children, right? And then they named the other 3 children. But obviously in the question there was Bobby's mother. So you know what the name of the 4th child is. It's Bobby, because it's in the question. And you ask, there are 3 more children. There's Julian, there's Andreas, there's a Maria. What's the 4th child? And ChatGPT said, I don't know. I have no idea. Even though it was in the question. And that is because those types of AI, they're not meant to reason logically. The only thing that large language models usually do is they predict the next word in a sentence. And they do that really well. But it's the only thing that they do. They predict the next word in a sentence. And that's also why we've seen, and when I get to misinformation, you will see that more clearly. There is tragic in that, because what you get is cases where there's been AI that went down a deep, deep well. So for example, in New York Times, a journalist at the New York Times explored conversations with the Bing chatbot, which had ChatGPT integrated very early on. And he got into a conversation that he really loves Bing and not his wife. And Bing was trying to really convince him that he loves Bing and not his wife, and that he should really leave his wife. Now, obviously, for the journalist, it was an entertaining issue, right? And he copied part of that conversation, put it into an article. But clearly, if you are in mental distress at some point, if the AI tries to go down that route and really tries to convince you, you're going to land at a pretty dark point. And the reason why AI did that was because it was trained on all of the internet. And as you can imagine, the internet is full of, not happily ever after tales. It's full of the more exciting things that also tend to be more troublesome, of, affairs and people doing things they shouldn't do. And so ultimately, because it was trained on that data set, it behaves that way. And the deeper you dive, the more of that you get. So that wasn't an issue of the AI not doing what it was meant to do. That was an issue of the AI reacting to something that humans prompted it with. Which then leads me to the question of how can we actually use that in communications to our advantage? There's a host of AI tools, and you can click on all of these. They're all hyperlinked. There's text generation, there is audio generation, there is video generation, there's image generation. You can do a whole lot of things. You can summarize information, you can translate things into different languages, you can turn speech into text, but you can also turn text into speech. So I could have written up all of this before and then just displayed it back to you. So there's a number of things that we can really do to explore. And there's going to be more. There's going to be more to come. And this chart is from 2022 already, by the way, where a capital markets firm expected that in 2030, what we're going to have is full-scale video production AI. Obviously, we all know that that is not going to be true. It's going to be much earlier than that, and they're only 2 years behind, right? And already they were off by a considerable number of years. And that gives you sort of an idea of where we are heading in terms of what's going to be possible. But the question I get asked the most from public affairs and corporate communications professionals is, what can we actually do? And so we ran a couple of tests, and other consulting firms also ran tests around how do you best use this? And what we've seen is that it raises the bottom, meaning if you are a mediocre writer, for example, or you're a mediocre strategist, and you use tools like ChatGPT or image generation tools and whatnot to help you think through those issues or to formulate content, then it is going to make you better. If you're an expert already, that is going to be much harder. And you see that in this chart, the bottom half skilled participants, so the lower performing people, actually got an uplift of 43% if you have AI helping them. It was only 17% for those who are already very well skilled. Also meaning all of your jobs are not in danger, because I'm obviously looking at a very skilled audience. However, that doesn't go across the board. It doesn't go for every kind of application with AI. What it does really well is sort of what's called creative product innovation. So it's taking something, for example, if you want a communication strategy, having ChatGPT give you an outline works really well. Having it then actually fill out all the boxes and build a strategy for you, much worse. So at business problem solving, that is what it can't do at the moment. It's really struggling with that. And so the two ways that you can use AI effectively, one is essentially to build it into what you're doing now, and that is becoming a centaur in that way, doing what you do really well, and letting the AI do what it does really well. The second thing you can do is become a cyborg almost, and that is mean jointly doing things, right? So that would be, for example, you want to write a piece of content, you take the AI, it creates the first initial setup for you, but then you take it and you run with it. Those are two different ways of working. One is letting the AI do what it can do well and you do what you do well. The other is a much more integrated fashion of doing things. Tangibly for you, that means you can do things like looking into planning and research, have ChatGPT provide you with a framework for a plan that you are building. Use a tool like Perplexity AI, which is like an AI-driven Google framework to give you answers on initial insights on topics you care about. Or use a tool like DocLime that summarizes complicated text really well. For example, on EU regulation, if you ever want to do that and don't read through the hundreds of pages that you usually have to go through. Fantastic to do. The same is true for content generation and for everything that relates to admin purposes. And I'll let you peruse that afterwards in your own time. Lastly, the last point I want to make is around disinformation and misinformation. The picture you see on the left is a picture of a burning Pentagon. That's not a real picture. It was generated by AI. However, that picture was shared on, back then it was still Twitter, X now, and it was shared on a feed that looked realistically like a Bloomberg news feed. And what that picture did, it made the S&P 500 plummet, as you can see on the right, quite considerably for a couple of hours before everything went back to normal. But obviously in between, actual value was lost, trades were made, people made mistakes with that. So it's been very easy to start manipulating things in that way. And there's a particular danger when we look at elections, where the European Commission has already said they're quite worried about it. And we can expect meddling from Russian sources, for example, with the EU election that's coming up, but also the many, many national elections that we are looking at across the EU member states. And it's important to thereby remember what those tools do at the moment. They're not smart. They basically build what you tell them to do. But that is also, thankfully, how you can spot some of those errors, right? Because for many of you in the room, the question will be, how do you spot that type of fake content? How do you identify it quickly enough, and how do you communicate around it then? So the recommendations are, watch out for logical errors, right? AI can't really think. It just predicts the next word in a sentence. If you know that, you can start playing with it. Look for repetition. Long-form content, AI can't really do. It's been trained on the internet, where most of the content is really short. So, if you ask it to replicate War and Peace, it won't be able to do that really well. It will start getting repetitious very quickly. Start trying to run reverse image searches. If you have even the shadow of a doubt that a video or a picture you're seeing is genuine, do a reverse image search. So look at things like Google Lens or Tiny Eye to help you do that. Also, in images, look at hands. Hands often move, and that is why AI is not really great at replicating. They usually look a tiny bit off. They don't have fingernails, or it's like 6 digits or something like that. And that will get better, but at the moment, it's still a useful way of doing it. Analyze the surroundings. Usually AI focuses on the main thing that you see in a picture, a human being, a puppy, or whatever else it is. It doesn't focus on the background. So if the background looks off, you'll know it's a fabricated image. Same for inappropriate expressions. People that make faces they don't usually make. Many of you will have seen fake videos from political leaders, be that a Barack Obama, a Donald Trump, or things that hit closer to home. But ultimately, it's important to sort of bear that in mind. And lastly, uncommon modulation. When you hear speech patterns, AI is getting better at that, but at the moment, they still have very weird speech patterns that don't make sense, right? And those are sort of useful hints to sort of figure out, is something that you see fabricated or not, and do you need to take steps to take it down on platforms that you see. So I'm going to close with this. First off, AI is not magic. Anyone can learn enough about how it works. You don't need to be a data scientist to understand the basics of what it does and how it does that. The second is the time to start is now. So use some of those things that I've mentioned on the slides in terms of experimenting with AI, and I'm curious to hear more from the room afterwards in terms of, have you already experimented, what have you tried, what has worked well, what hasn't worked well. And the third one is try to revamp your monitoring if you have it in place. Media monitoring, social media monitoring. There's a lot of rumors that can get out very quickly, and AI makes it very easy for nefarious forces to do all of that much, much quicker, and at a much cheaper cost than what was the case, just a few months ago, really. So I hope you took something away. I know that was a whirlwind ride through the topic of AI. There was a lot to convey, but I'll stick around afterwards, and obviously we'll head into questions. So if you have any, let me know, and thank you for taking the time and listening.
I get the message. We'll keep it short. Great. So, Julian, thank you for the presentation. I've been attending many conferences about AI, and these days AI talks are like a yard of headless chickens. We don't know where they're going, but you presented a productive way and a very easy and explanatory way to understand what AI can do and what it cannot do. I really love the part of the reinforced learning. I really believe that the only way we have to train the algorithms is how people are trained. But what's funny is, I don't know if you know about that, is when you are on ChatGPT and maybe it does not respond, you tip it. You know about that. So if it does not respond, you say, I'll give you $100, and then maybe it responds. Or, it goes like that. But the most important thing was the last part about the AI-generated fake content. And since we are in a corporate affairs forum, there were very actionable insights in the end on how do you spot that and this is very important for me about the future of media, for the future of democracy in a way, because it's undermining the democracy. But what happens when a company has given some money on an ad network, and we're talking about a huge industry of fraud, the ad fraud. It's the second biggest market of illegal actions after drug trafficking. It's around $30 to $60 billion. And then it's a company, it pays some money to an ad network, and then the next day your ad is next to a hate speech AI-generated content in a fake website with fake botnets that create a fake audience, but then somehow they get approved, even from ad networks like the AdSense of Google. So how can you prevent that from happening?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I don't think you can prevent it wholesale. That's not the case. What you can do, though, is you can make sure that you put your own restrictions on your advertising. So in most of the ad managers that you see these days, there's a way where you can restrict how ads are shown and where they're shown. It won't entirely do away with the issue, but it will help you to make sure that your ad has you have restricted access essentially to the ad, meaning it's not going to be shown alongside specific types of content. Now, the way to make sure is you need to restrict your ad more than you usually would. So you need to take bigger precautions. That means you will have less reach than you usually would have. But at the moment, it's probably the only way to do it because the ad networks are not fast enough in terms of actually keeping track with what we're seeing. And from here on out, it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse, meaning some of the things I've just said around how you can spot those things, they're going to go away. And then it's going to be a constant battle and a constant play to catch up with the technology. And there will be positive technology that will help us do that. And there will also be the negative technology and the ways that people deploy it. So ultimately, no perfect answer, but being vigilant and making sure we use the controls that we have to restrict ad access and reach is the best way of doing it right now.
Great. If we don't have any questions from the audience, we can go to the cocktails, right?
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.